there, it's Olivia-Savannah here from Catastrophe, and today I'm here with
Yana,
who is my best friend. If you've been around for a bit, Yana has been on the channel before, and we're going to be doing exactly the same kind of video that we did last time, which is where we each choose a book that we really like that the other person hasn't read, and we make them switch. But before we talk about these books, so tell us a bit about yourself. What do you do? What do you like to read?
I like to read mostly romance, but I like to believe that I like to read a bit of everything. It's just, I think with romance I can read almost anything, whereas for other books I need it to be well written.
You got some critique, judgment, taste?
I have very specific taste, and I think most of the time if I read it, then it's romance, and anything else I will tend to listen as an audiobook.
Do you have like three favorite, or like three authors you read a lot from, so they can understand your taste?
I really like, well, it's more of a recent one, I really like T.J. Klune. I have also reread Talia Hibbert. Let's see, who's the author of Heartstopper?
Alice Oseman.
Yes, I like Alice Oseman as well.
Perfect. So, full disclosure, we're swapping books, but we've made each other get these books in some ways.
Yeah.
Which book have you chosen for me to read?
I chose The Husband Material, so it's a sequel to Boyfriend Material, which you have already read, and then you recommended to me, and then here I am recommending Husband Material back to you.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's the book. Well, it's a romance. I guess not very surprising there. Actually, there are a couple of reasons why I want to recommend it to you, because I think all of them narrow down to I really want to discuss the book with you. But I thought that the book was really interesting, and I think you're going to enjoy it, mostly because I felt like it's a bit different to the usual romance that I read. So at least for me it was different and unique. There you go, that's a very good word. And I think on that level I find the character of Oliver really relatable for me, because he tends to overthink like crazy, and I feel like I do the same, and I feel like you can see it, or you could see it in Boyfriend Material, you can also see it in this book, and I feel like from certain things that he does I do the same, but then once I read it, it felt very different, or I felt a certain way about it when I was reading it, and I realized that I do the same thing, and I feel like I had a lot of personal growth that came from reading this book. Hence, I'm curious to discuss what you think about it as well.
Okay. Thank you. Well,
here you go.
Here's my book back. And the book that this is actually sounds really good. I read the synopsis for the first time just now, and I was like, actually, it sounds really good. I recommend to you American Queen by Simone. I read this in December, and even though it was the last month of the year, it made it into my top books of the year video. Last time we did this, I recommended For Real by Alexis to you, which was Alexis Hall's steamiest book, and on trend, I'm recommending you this super steamy BDSM book. Once again, BDSM. It's about the President of the United States, who has a vice president who is his best friend, and he meets this girl who exists in the political world, and he really likes her as well. And things get a bit complicated with their romantic lives. It is BDSM, it is polyamorous threesome, but it's also a retelling of King Arthur, Lancelot and Merlin, and it does the retelling elements in a very creative way. So it actually has a storyline. I'm not just giving you loads of sex scenes. And I do think it was also well written, which I think can be very difficult to find. I don't know if you will love it as much as I did.
We will see.
But I hope you like it more than you liked For Real.
I think you liked
You liked For Real, but I want you to think it's a 5-star out of 5-star, not a 4-star. Hopefully. We'll see.
Alright, thank you.
I hope you enjoy it. So what's going to happen next is we're both going to go our separate ways and read these books, because we live in separate countries, and we will be filming ourselves as we update each other, well, update you guys on our reading, and then once we are in the same country again, which will happen at some point inevitably, hopefully, we will be reacting to the footage that the other person has filmed for each other. So this video will be quite long. Get yourself a cup of tea and we'll be back in the future. We're here to record our reactions to the books that you read. Now that we both read them, a couple months later, who's we watching first?
Yours.
I thought you might say that. Okay, so it's been a little bit of time since we filmed the beginning of our video, but I am now a quarter of the way through Husband Material, so I'm here to do my first update. Now, when I read Boyfriend Material, I was a little bit strict with it because it was my first time reading Alexis Hall's book that was traditionally published, and it felt very different from his other books. Notably, there was no spice in that one, and so far from what we've seen in this one, while there are like warm-ups to where there could be steamy scenes, it's all very closed door. So you're definitely getting a closed door rom-com from this, and I'm saying rom-com because it's actually putting the comedy in the romance, and I'm really enjoying that element to it. I do like Alexis Hall's humour. I think they know how to write a really funny story. Sometimes the situations that they get themselves in are very silly, and in this one it's the sequel, so you've moved on to a new point in their relationship, and I just love Oliver as a boyfriend. He is the most lovely man. I really liked him in the first one, and I continue to really like him here. Luke was a bit annoying in the first one sometimes because he's just so messy, but in this one you can tell that he's really matured in some ways. He's still quite messy and situational and gets himself into lots of various situations, but he's very aware of the ways that his upbringing and his time in the limelight within journalism has kind of affected him, and he's aware of the psychological obstacles that he has to get past in order to make a relationship work. And so it's kind of nice to see him just be a bit more mature and aware of what he has going on and how he can make things work in the relationship. So far in this first quarter, there's been a lot of wedding shenanigans, and I was surprised that the wedding shenanigans are not his wedding. From the title Husband Material, I thought it was going to be about like his wedding shenanigans, but it's about someone else's wedding shenanigans, which has been fun to read because both of my sisters got married within the past month, and I get to relate to some of the elements here. Not all of them, but some of them, and it's just been like a really good time. I don't have much more to say than it's been fun and really nice, and so I'm hoping that I get to the halfway mark and more of the plot is introduced, because right now it felt like it was warming up. It was giving us a situation, it was creating some humour, creating some drama, getting us back into knowing the characters again, back into this eclectic friendship group, and now I'm ready for more of the plot that's focused on these two main characters to really kick in.
I feel like you're very optimistic about it at this point, and then it's just gonna go downhill from there. You know, whatever it was set up for. Is that what you expected it to do?
So at this point, I hadn't read the synopsis. And I was like, why are we talking about this person's wedding? And then I got so confused about why we were talking about this person's wedding that I think by the next one, which is the halfway mark, I read the synopsis because I was like, what is the plot of the book? And then it says it's a retelling of 4 weddings and a funeral. So then I understood the plot is that there will be 4 weddings and a funeral. But then I knew like, oh, it's a retelling of this. So now I know what the structure is going to be, so then I can better appreciate the lack of plot because I know what the setup is.
I feel like the only other comment is I feel I did something similar, that I read the quarter first and then I actually read the synopsis after that. But I think I more so read the synopsis to try to figure out what is in the synopsis, so what can I actually say. Because I feel like whatever is in the synopsis I can actually say, and whatever is building on top of that, not really. So that was why. But it's funny that we both did the same thing, but then for different reasons.
I'm so curious to know what's going to be in your section.
But no. Let's see, do I have any other thoughts?
So you think that after this it goes downhill for me?
I don't think it goes downhill in terms of you liking it. I think it goes downhill in terms of maybe what you expect the story to be like. Because I feel like maybe you're expecting it to go like in a positive direction, but I feel like storyline wise it like gets more like dark.
Yeah. Okay. Next one?
Yes.
So I am in a fantastic mood. I'm now halfway through the material and I have thoughts. So I'm not exactly sure how I feel about this one because I've actually read a bit over halfway. I think I'm at the 55% mark. I'm switching between reading on my Kindle when I'm on the tube and reading physically when I'm at home. So I know that I am exactly at the 55% mark. And I'm struggling a little bit because we're way over halfway. We're reaching the 2/3 of the way through this book and we're not even done with the second wedding. Like, it's 4 weddings and a funeral. We took so long at the first 2 weddings, we're gonna have to rush through the last 2 weddings and the funeral. So it's 3 weddings and a funeral, which I didn't know by this point. I thought we were gonna get 4, so now the pacing makes a bit more sense. But I do think they spent way too long on the first 2 weddings. The funeral deserved more time. I think the last wedding is also a bit rushed for what it is. Especially the first one. It was so much. Like, it was so much about them, and I was like,
Nobody cares.
not nobody cares, but then with the rest of the book, the other ones at least, actually is it, no, hang on, it is 4 weddings and a funeral.
Yeah, so it is 4 weddings and a funeral.
But you know what, in the book it splits it part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, and I think it doesn't split one of them. No, it does. I don't know what happened. My brain just... Anyway, it spends very long on the first 2 weddings when I think the first wedding doesn't actually give any crisis or give any, like, effect on the plot. And I'm assuming that one of the funerals, I'm sorry, not one of the funerals, I'm assuming that one of the weddings needs to be for these 2 main characters, and I definitely don't want to rush through that. So I really hope that we're getting all 4 weddings. I definitely don't want to rush through that. I'm just saying that I said I don't want to rush through the last one. And I rushed through the last one.
I think because you know whose wedding will be last, and that's the one you care the most about, so you don't want them to rush through it, and then the closer you get to it, the more you fear that they will rush through it.
In a funeral. But my main struggle with this one is that, like, there is no plot for sake of a better way of describing it. It is just going to be weddings and funerals, and while I do enjoy seeing how...
I like how you're sticking with funerals.
I just keep forgetting there's only going to be one funeral.
I think because weddings, so then
funerals.
Yeah.
How they both know how to overcome some of the difficulties of being in a relationship, and they're having very healthy conversations around their mental health, around their traumas that they have, especially like Oliver with his parents and Luke with the way that he perceives himself. So many healthy conversations going on here, but there is no plot, there is no storyline or big tragedy that is really making me want to keep turning the pages. When I'm not picking this one up, I'm not exactly missing it, but when I am picking it up, I'm still smiling. I'm still finding it to be very cute and very sweet, and that is because Luke and Oliver are just such lovely main characters to follow, and I'm seeing myself in Luke a little bit too much for my taste, but I just adore Oliver. He's the ideal boyfriend. He's so dreamy.
I think that is funny because I see myself in Oliver, which brings us back to a very funny situation of like, we would make a very interesting couple.
Yes.
Which works in that book.
It works, but for the beginning. By the end of the book, I was like, okay, I see myself in Oliver a lot.
Yeah, that could be actually.
But in the beginning, I saw myself in Lucian a lot. I think also because I recently read, for you guys at home, I recently read Actual Age Eve Brown, and she worries that she's failing all the time, and I was like, I relate to that in Eve. And I think in the beginning of the book, or like Luke as a character is always worried that he's like failing compared to Oliver, and I'm like, okay, that I can relate to. But Oliver does a lot of changing in this book, and I think as he changes, I'm like, okay, actually, I relate to Oliver a lot more. But I can understand why you relate to Oliver all the way through.
Yeah, I think he has a problem with texting and understanding things through text and overthinking, and I was like, yeah, me.
That's you. That's you. But also, it's kind of sweet that I love Oliver so much, and then you're like Oliver. Oh.
That's exactly what I mean. It's very funny.
Yeah, and it's pleasant to read about a character that is as lovely as Oliver is. And there are funny situations, like situational humour. Alexis Hall does it very, very well. Luke finds himself in all sorts of like silly situations. But I just don't think that entertaining makes a good romance. I say that I don't think entertaining makes a good romance, but what I mean is I don't think funny makes a good romance. Because romances should be entertaining, but like, I don't think humour is enough just to make romance.
You mean between them or in the book?
In a book. Like, you need more than just like funny times to make a good romance book. Like, it's an essential. This is getting a bit meta, isn't it? It's getting a bit genre discussion-y, but I think humour is an essential part of a good romance. A good characterization is an essential part of a good romance, and development is an essential part of a good romance. But we're not actually seeing them develop here because they've done the developing, they've done the heavy work of figuring out how they work together. So I don't really think they're actually doing much developing, they're doing existing. And I think that's what's also lacking now that I've pinned that down. There's not enough character development because they've both already been working on themselves. And even when they have little quibbles, it's not that they need to develop to overcome them, it's just that they need to talk it out. So the characterization is static and the plot is static. And so it's just a slice of life story, which is a nice vibe. And some people are going to appreciate that vibe, and that person is not me, because I need a bit more meat to my story, even if it's romance, or I need a bit of a heavier thematic look. And while it does touch a little bit on like queer life, it doesn't really like, it doesn't delve into it. It doesn't delve in it too deeply. I just needed to read more.
But see, that's part of it. But I feel like the exact points of what you're saying are also points that I liked. And I think for me, it came more from a place of, it's one of the first books that follows people once they're in an established relationship. And I think I really like that, because then I can read, like, it's the same as I like talking to other like couples on, let's say, what their problems are, not because I want to know their drama, but I want to know what it is and how they deal with it, so that I can improve from that. And I think for me that's a bit similar, seeing what the things are, because you like the whole like lack of communication, or like saying a lot of the issues would be resolved if they just communicated. And I think when you are in the relationship, you don't realize that, and it takes, at least I think for me, it took reading it to be like, wait, if I have that problem, they just need to say it. If I just say it, my problem is resolved. And I think from that I actually started doing it.
But I also think they're not avoiding the communication, because they're very good at, like, that's what I mean by they don't need to develop, is that they don't need to learn how to communicate, because they learn that in the first book. And it's like, if they have an issue, they do immediately talk about it. So their characterization is not developing, but their relationship is developing, which I think is valid. I do think I like when books have a couple that are already established who then talk, who then show that part of the relationship. Like, a lot of the books that I like, which are very difficult to find, is when they're like already a married couple and then the book starts. So then, like, they know each other very well, they start those relationships, so what is their relationship tension going to be? But I like that in more so like fantasy or sci-fi books. I'm realizing where there's another plot that has nothing to do with their relationship, but they have to manage, I don't know, they've got their established relationship, but what is causing the tension in their relationship is not something they faced before. Because then it makes it more interesting how their relationship then develops around that plot that is a different plot. And I think that's why I found it so difficult in the romance book, because I would rather their relationship was a background one. But I'm going to talk about them more. And it was interesting because in my Alexis Hall, like a guide to Alexis Hall's book, somebody mentioned that Oliver talks about the queer community as if he doesn't like it. And I don't actually think this book does that. I'm going to argue against that. I think it's showing that Oliver feels like he doesn't fit into a certain way that queer life is presented. And that depiction of queer life is a very stereotypical one, but not everybody's going to fit into those margins. It's also like the same way that sometimes people see blackness as one specific thing. You have to like this to be black. And in some black community spaces, I felt excluded because it's not catering to who I am as a black person, but it's catering to one element of the black experience. Black people are not a monolith. Queer people are not a monolith. Not all queer people are going to enjoy like flamboyant parades, which is fine. Some people can. And Oliver's not saying don't let people enjoy that. He's just saying that's not how I demonstrate or feel at home within the queer community. I feel at home within the queer community in a different way, and that is perfectly normal. There's room for all those queer people and there's room for all those black people. Yeah, so I don't think that Oliver shows any disdain. At no point does he say it's bad to be part of all of that, so I push back on that comment a little bit. But yeah, that was totally off the rocker of what I wanted to talk about, but I think it summarizes my thoughts and feelings this far into the book so far. I still enjoy it though. It's just not... This Alexis Hall series is not my Alexis Hall that I read. I'm so much a fan of their indie published stuff that I am really struggling with this traditionally published stuff. Not because it's bad, but simply because it's different. And I'm still finding it hard to reconcile what is or what isn't working for me, because it's not the writing style. The writing style is still fantastic. I think it's just the stories that they're choosing to tell at the moment are a lot more commercially interesting to a wider range of people, but the other ones spoke to my soul, and these ones don't quite manage to do that, even though they're still romances. Okay, that's it, I'm really done.
On some level, maybe for this book, I would say that you love Oliver, but Oliver is the one who does the character development, I think, and Luke does the unnoticed character development, that he's just different from one book to the other.
Yeah.
Like he's grown up from one book to another.
Let's see how this update goes. Okay, so I've read more of boyfriend material, and actually Yana comes here tomorrow, so I've read a bit more than 3/4. I'm at the 82-83% mark actually, but I've got quite a lot to say, so let's get down to business. I'm struggling with this, and so far this is my least favorite Alexis Hall book. So I wanted to touch on one of the topics that's really a key thing here, which is internalized homophobia and how Oliver views his queer lifestyle versus how Luke views it. And to be fair, in this argument, I think one person is being portrayed as wrong and one person is being portrayed as right, and the person who is portrayed as right in some sense is right. So there is a lot of internalized homophobia that they need to work through and all of that, but I really don't like the way that this person is telling the other person to deal with it. I don't think the way that they are communicating this is in the most supportive and loving way possible. I also think, despite this, the person who is in the wrong, let's say, actually has some valid opinions to make about monoliths and community and how you express your sexuality. So I'm just going to leave that here because I don't want to get into spoilers territory for anyone, because I want this to be a spoiler-free vlog, as me and Yana have agreed. But there are some really big discussions here, and I just don't think certain characters are handling it as sensitively as they can. And also, one character in nearly all of the tensions that have happened in this novel is perceived as being correct, while the other is perceived as being wrong, and I also don't think that's right. I think it should be shown as a bit more of an equal give and take. And while this character who is always portrayed as being in the wrong is often in the wrong in some sense, they are going through a lot emotionally, like a lot emotionally, and I just think that's also not understood and accounted for as much when it comes to these really big topics and discussions that are being had. So while I do think Alexis Hall is very good at dealing with topics and discussions, I don't think this is the best way to do it. And part of the reason why I think this is not the best way to do it is because I don't like Oliver's character. No, sorry, not Oliver. I love Oliver to pieces. I do not like Luke's character. I think I talked about this in Boyfriend Material before, but I did find him a bit annoying in Boyfriend Material, and it's exasperated in Husband Material. I'm finding him even more annoying than he used to be, and some of the characters do say, like, you are mean. That's something we know about you. But I don't think I realised just how mean he can truly be. So, yes, I'm struggling with Luke's character as well. I'm finding him quite annoying. I'm sorry, Yana. I'm sorry to be ripping into it, but I have to be honest here. I'm always honest on this channel. And also, sometimes it's repetitive. And this is the second book, so they could have switched.
Yeah, that was the point that I was surprised about, that they didn't switch. I would have expected that this book is from the perspective of Oliver. I think you did as well, until I told you it's not.
Yeah. Or even just give them one chapter Luke, one chapter Oliver. That could be interesting. Yeah. And I'm not saying the story itself is repetitive, because that is not repetitive whatsoever. The 4 weddings and a funeral setup that it's doing, even though I know that setup, it is not repetitive. But what is repetitive is certain paragraphs. Luke will say, I'm not gonna ask, I'm not gonna ask, I'm not gonna ask, and then he asks, and that's supposed to be funny, but I'm just like, I've read that sentence 3 times. And the fact that he does that more than once, and sometimes multiple times in one chapter, it gets a bit repetitive. And it's just other writing things that just don't work with me. Like Oliver goes on a whole monologue and it lasts for several pages and I got very exhausted by it, and he's repeating the same phrase throughout the monologue. It's just little fine-tuning writing things that I think could have been edited out or edited down. I was struggling with the fact that there didn't seem to be much plot for this, and I don't think there is much plot for this. I do think sometimes the plot for this is just the theory and the philosophical and identity discussions that they're having, which is fine. I think that can carry a story alongside the retelling elements. I just think if you are reading this one, do go in knowing there's not as much plot as there is in Boyfriend Material, which has the fake dating element to it. And I think, again, there not being that plot, as well as my conflicting feelings on the characters and how the things are being handled, is making this not as good a book as the first one for me. I'm still laughing out loud sometimes. The jokes that they have, the sense of humour that their relationship carries is really nice and fun.
Because I think maybe that's why I like the book, because in a way it didn't have a plot, and then that's a lot like life.
Yes.
They're just going through their life and you're reading their like events that happen, but there's no like real points. I guess the real point is maybe like their own wedding, that you know it's building towards. But yeah, I think that's why I like it, because then it's almost like a relationship, which you wouldn't expect to read a book for that purpose.
Yes.
But then I also like it for that purpose.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that is incredibly valid.
You just don't like it.
I just couldn't get on board. I think because Boyfriend Material has so much plot to it, that with this being a sequel, I'm ready for more of the same thing. Yeah. And then it's not the same thing at all. It's almost like this is a separate book in my head. Like, yeah.
See, which I completely agree with. And I think I agree with all the points as well. And I think me liking the book doesn't mean I will reread the book. I think me liking the book comes from two very specific points, which I will tell you in the end.
Yes. Also, I did start to like this more when the grief element came into it. I'm typically myself, I love anything to do with grief. I think it's a fascinating subject and theme. And so when the funeral part kicked in here, I did get a bit more invested, especially as it's not a straight up grieving process. There's more complications to it. And I was wondering who was going to die so that we can have that grieving process. And I do think this book handled the grief side of things well, especially for the complexity of the situation that it's in. And also during that period, it kind of made me think about like, how would I best describe this book? And it feels like Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice blended with the characters from Sense and Sensibility, because I do think there's a lot happening here with their personality types, where Oliver is definitely the more sense person, he's definitely the more prejudice person, and then Luke is very much the pride person and the sensibility person. And I think those personalities of Jane Austen, even though it's such a far cry from the genre of this book, are really standing out to me, and it's something that I like I like their contrast, I like the conversations that they're having. I just wish they were handled a bit better. It's leaving me wonder, do I actually ship this couple? Which is interesting because I think the couple themselves are having this question, as everybody does, not everybody, but a lot of people sometimes do, right before, you know, thinking about marriage, when your friends are getting married. Do we actually belong with each other forever and ever? Amen. And I don't actually think I ship them anymore. I think the events of this book has made me ship them a lot less. And I think that's kind of the perils that you fall into with a romance series that follows the same set of characters all the way through. I love personally, and what I liked of Alexis Hall's previous series is that you follow one couple and then you follow another couple, and the previous couple have a cameo in the next book, and maybe sometimes you see them having relationship drama, but it's happening behind the scenes of another plot. I think when you do fall into following the same romantic couple across the series, which I so rarely see when romance is the main point of the book and the main genre, is that we see their ups and downs, we see their struggles, and that love haze of new love rubs off. And how do you make the part that's left behind as romantic as what we originally had? Because there is something beautiful about life after you've started a relationship. There is something beautiful about routines and those kind of conflicts that you have, and I do like seeing them. But in this one, I feel like it's lost the haze of what is romantic. It's a tough line to balance. Yeah, I'm transitioning away from calling Alexis Hall my favourite romance author, which just seems so brutal to say, but I do think Sarah Simone has taken over, and in the scale of how many Sarah Simone books I've loved versus Alexis Hall, it's definitely Sarah Simone now, which is interesting because I know Jana's reading her right now. But yeah, we'll see how this goes.
And so like, we'll see how it goes. Quits.
For context, since December, every month I've read at least 2 Sarah Simone books. So it's like,
You catch him up quickly.
I've already read way more Sarah Simone than Alexis Hall.
Makes sense.
And before, I mostly read the same series by Alexis Hall again and again and again, like the Glitterland, that 4 books. Used to read them again and again and again. So actually maybe I've read more Alexis Hall just by reading them again. But I actually hadn't read romance by them in another series yet, so I hadn't been like tested beyond. Whereas with Sarah Simone, I read many different series and it's been more tested. The camera's kind of crooked, but I'm just here to give you my final update on Husband Material. And Jana, I'm so sorry, but I kind of hated the ending. I kind of hated the ending, and I can't spoil the ending, so it's really hard to talk about why I hated the ending. But there's specific things about what I like in reading that I like to see. Yes, there's specific things that I like to see in reading. And there's specific tropes that I like to see. And I think there's some parts of the ending that are very, very nice because it is representative of a lot of what this book is about. But there are some parts about the ending that I just personally really don't like. And there's 2 strands to why I don't like it. And I can't tell you guys because it's a spoiler-free video. But if you want to know more, just leave a comment down below. Say give me spoilers for Husband Material in your comment, and I will do that in my response to you about the reasons why I didn't like it if you've read it before or you don't have any interest in reading it. But ultimately, it's not the kind of ending that I tend to like when I am reading books like this. There's 4 things here, right? The 4 things I want to talk about, other than the fact that I didn't like the ending, is number 1, I feel like the author wanted to write a non-fiction piece about the constructions of marriage in terms of queer relationships, and then did not get to do that and wrote this fiction book instead. I feel like this book should have been told entirely from Oliver's point of view. Oliver is the character that does the most development in this one. Oliver is the character that has the most emotional turmoil that he's going through. Oliver is the one that this book needed to be about. Luke is very much secondary charactering while being the main character of the book, and it just doesn't work. Thirdly, I don't think the first one needed a sequel. I think I would have been far happier with Boyfriend Material had that been the end. I don't think Husband Material really needed to exist. I'm being so harsh here. I'm sorry, Jana. I'm so sorry.
I also kind of love it. Like, I love the commentary. It's not like I love that you hated it, but I like the honesty.
Yeah. I mean, I'll always tell you my honest thoughts.
Like, just because we like a lot of similar books doesn't mean we will always overlap. So I think it's also interesting to see why you don't like certain books I might like,
but
and vice versa.
This one is so interesting because the elements you like about it, I'm like, yeah, I do like that. I do like to see a couple past like the initial love moment, and then when I'm like, I think this is the problem, you're like, oh yeah, I agree. So we still have the same thoughts, we just take different enjoyment.
Yeah.
The 4th thing is that this should have been, if you are going to do a sequel of a romance series, I think I talked about it before in a previous update, this should have actually been about Priya and the throuple. Like, Priya should have been the main character because I'm interested in her relationship, and I do like it when Alexis Hall, who's done this before with the Glitterland series, the Spy series, just jump in between the different characters rather than give us more from the same pairing. I think this really would have been good if it could have been about Priya and the throuple, and they were discussing marriage and what that means and how they feel about it, because I think that would have been very interesting from the throuple perspective, would have added something new. I really struggled with this, and so my rating of it is quite difficult. I think it's between a 3 and a 2. I'm so sorry. I feel so frustrated by the ending that I feel like giving it a 2 stars right now, but I think if I think about it, is it a 3? Or is it a 2? I think it's sitting at like 2.5. I don't even do half stars, and I don't love to rate things as soon as I finish them. I literally just finished reading this because Jana is 3 hours away by train. I need to think about it. I need to think about this and see if it's a 3-star or 2-star for me. Am I going to read Father Material, which is what the 3rd book is called? Probably. but I won't do it physically. I think I'm going to do that through audiobook. It's just such a tragedy. I can't believe I didn't like this as much. But of course I'm going to talk spoilers with Yana and we can get into the reasons why I didn't like the ending. But for all of you here, I hope you're enjoying our reaction. Those are my honest and undistilled thoughts of reading Husband Material. I gave it a 3 in the end. For the record, I gave it a 3 in the end. Because as you said, it does something original, and then after I got over my initial feelings, I was like, it's not like bad as in
bad writing or unenjoyable read.
Exactly.
It just makes you feel things while you read that you're like, I don't want to be feeling this now.
Yeah, and I didn't agree with everything, but like it's not a book I would give away. So I was like, so it's a 3.
See, that's the thing, that I feel like I agree with it all.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I wanted you to read it and to discuss it for like all those elements, for all the elements.
We're now gonna watch you react to American Queen.
Yes.
And get your opinions. I have to say, I'm already very happy that you're in front of your bookshelf. That's great.
Yes. Right? I was proud.
So far, I'm about a quarter way through the book, and I'm finding it very easy to read and very easy to get into the story. I am not the fastest reader, but I find that with this book, I'm going through it rather quickly by my own standards, so I think that shows exactly how much I'm enjoying the book. It starts with a prologue where we are thrown in the middle of an event which, at least at this point, we don't understand how we got to this situation, and also who are these characters that have been introduced to us. In the prologue, we get introduced to Greer, who is the main character. We also get introduced to Ash, who seems to potentially be the love interest of Greer, and we also get to meet their friend, Embry.
He's my favourite.
Embry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I expected that.
Wait, who's your favourite?
Out of the 3 of them?
Yeah.
Yeah, Embry would be my more favorite, to be honest. But you see, I have not read the back of it.
Oh, at this point, yeah.
You can tell. Sorry. You can also tell that I've done this multiple times because by this point I'm speaking quite slowly.
Yeah.
Because I rewatched it so many times. I was like, okay, I need to pace this better. Otherwise,
also,
I was not breathing.
I'm pro booktuber.
Okay. I was like, how am I doing this right?
From there, the book goes back in time where we get to meet a young Greer. From there, we are able to understand and see what kind of environment she grew up in, which seemed to be quite an elite and quite a political environment. We also get to meet her granddad, who is the cause of her being in such a political and elite environment, especially for quite a young child at that point. From there, the book skips a couple years, so we also get to know what Greer was like as a teenager, and then we jump into her current timeline, where we also get to see who she grew up to be. So what I find the book does quite well is manage the timeline, because there's the current timeline of Greer, but there is also the events that have happened in the past that have formed her, or events that are relevant to the story. And I feel like that they are introduced in a really smart manner, where you're only given the amount of details that you needed, and then those details are woven back into the main storyline.
I think that's what I like about Sarah Simone. Like, this is a super sexy book, but it's still like well written. Like well planned.
Yeah,
that's nice.
That's true.
In one of the interactions from the past, Greer meets her love interest, Ash, who she becomes quite obsessed with, and then in her current timeline, she actually is able to meet him, and they're able to start a relationship. And at the point quarter way through, they are in the midst of their first they're in the midst of their first sexual interaction, which, based on how I was advertised this book, I know that there are potentially many more to come. So far, I would say, though, that there's not much that has happened in terms of the storyline for the current timeline of Greer. We get to know a lot about past events and how she grew up, but not much has happened in her current timeline, and I imagine that is because a lot of details are introduced beforehand and then they're woven back into the story, so we'll get to know a lot more soon.
and I'm looking forward to it because there are also a couple mysteries or a couple of relations that are hinted at, but at least not outright spoken. So I'm curious to see how they got to that point and what actually happens with them and what some of them even mean. One aspect about the book that I also really enjoy is the fact that it's set in first person. So we actually hear from Greer herself how everything is going from when she was a child to also being older. And I find that very nice because normally I would say in a lot of romances that I've read, the book is set in third person, and I feel like it just misses some of the emotion and some of the feeling from the person where you're being told, okay, they feel this, they feel that, but it's very different when you're being told from the first perspective of I feel this, I feel that. I feel like that also gives us a bit more detail into how they're experiencing things, and from that I find the book to be a lot more relatable. I think normally with a lot of books it takes me a couple chapters to get into the book, sometimes even going through quarter of the book, whereas here I think a couple pages in I was already hooked and wanting to know more.
I like the no, I like this. I do think I agree that the beginning of the book is quite slow in terms of like the further in you get, then the relationships get more complex and then there's like more happening and then you kind of understand what the book is going to be about. But in the beginning it is a bit like, okay, introduced to this character and this situation and this character and all the backstory. So I pretty much agree with the beginning. I think you agreed with everything in my beginning, and it's like you just have to wait and see what's going to happen next. Like a quarter mark is a hard mark.
Currently I am halfway through the book, which as it turns out the book is naturally divided into two parts, which is something I did not know of before. Part 1, the one that I've just finished reading, is called The Princess, and then part 2, The Queen, is coming up. So far, I am very curious on why the book is divided that way, and especially with those titles. It does make sense for the Queen, since American Queen is the title, but I'm quite curious on what will change in part 2 to warrant having part 2 and warrant it being divided into Princess and Queen. For me, that means some kind of elevation, growth in Greer herself, or changing of status for Greer. But I guess coming up in the second half of the book.
So, the versions that I read of this were the indie published versions, because this was first indie published and then picked up traditionally published. So I wonder if in the traditionally published they put in Princess Queen. And I don't have that. Because I also don't know why they would split it Princess Queen. Because also, like, I know it's Princess Queen, but like, actually he's the president, so...
Well, isn't his book called King? American King? Like,
that has to do though with like the history of the Arthurian legend.
Yeah? Oh, okay. My only logic was like he does call her a princess. He calls Embry the prince, and well, he's then the king through all that logic.
Yes.
And the only thing I could justify it with is that, well, Embry can't be the king, but since Greer is the only like female in the relationship, even though he calls her princess, she's like the queen in that case.
Which this metaphor works, especially for the fact that because it's a polyamorous relationship. She has to be the princess and the queen. How much do you know about the Arthurian legend? That nothing. Oh my gosh, what? This must be
Missing
such
context.
This must be such a different reading experience for you.
Not knowing it.
Not knowing it.
Probably.
Oh my gosh, I have so much to tell you after this.
I'm curious.
About Arthurian legend, okay.
Aside from that, regarding the story, we are getting some answers to the questions from the first quarter, but at least unexpected to me, there's still a lot of jumps to the past where we get to know some kind of background about Greer, or in one of the cases also her relationship to Embry. I also feel like a lot of the questions that I had in the first quarter of the book have kind of been answered, so I have felt that my motivation to read maybe slightly declined, just because just because I could not see where the book was going to go, so I assumed, at least based on my previous experience with other romance books, that maybe from this onwards, mostly what there will be is some steamy scenes, and then some problem will happen and they'll get resolved, and voila, everybody's happy. So it seems to be at that place now where everybody is happy and there are some steamy scenes. There are also not as many as I expected there to be, so that's also interesting, but they are definitely not what I expected them to be.
Do you know what? This is a pleasant surprise from last time, because last time you're like, there's so much more sex scenes than I thought there were going to be. This time you're like, you know what? There's less. But to some people there's still a lot, so I don't know if that means your expectations have changed. Or
I think my expectations have changed.
your expectations have changed.
Yeah. I think it was the for real that it's just like happening every single chapter, maybe? I don't know. I think maybe for real was the first time that I encountered so many. And I think this book technically also has many, but less than for real.
Yes.
They're just more intense.
Yes. I agree.
Yeah, which is it's not what I expected them to be. I don't know why I expected anything else, but for whatever reason, that was not what I expected.
But also that's not... I don't see why you would expect it, because that's not all I read though.
Yeah, no, and I think that's exactly why it's not what I expected.
Makes
Or
sense.
it was like a level further than what I expected. Because it's like a level further than for real, because of the intensity of everything they do.
Okay.
The other person's just...
I think also the intensity of what they do is emphasized by the actually having a story. In my head at least. Or is it just
Maybe
like
that-
more detail in the scenes than you usually get?
It's not the more detail, I think it's just it's like more dominant, more like, I will talk about it in the next part, I think, or at the end. I think it comes around to what the more actually is. And I think it also, I don't know, was for real in first person?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it will.
And I feel like this book also has a slightly different timeline again, due to the fact that in the middle of the book it seems like everybody is settled and happy, almost the way that people will be at the end of the book. So definitely a twist on at least the normal progression that I feel like I read. And that is why story-wise I feel like there are not that many updates, because it feels like not that many things have happened. We learned how Embry and Greer are not related, but what their relationship is and where it stems from. And to be honest, that's about it. So some of the gaps have been filled in, but those gaps have been introduced before. So that's why, it feels like story-wise not much has progressed so far. So, but I'm curious what will happen in the second half, so we'll come back to that. I'm 3/4 of the way through the book, and I must say that I'm enjoying this third quarter of the book a lot more than I did the second quarter of the book. I think that's mostly to do with the fact that the story in the present timeline of Greer is developing a lot more in this part, so there's a lot more story progression, and I think based on that I'm also able to build some expectations of what is going to happen, but also look forward to how they're going to develop certain storylines that they already have. So definitely enjoying that third quarter more than the halfway through, where I think at the halfway through it felt that things have gone a little bit more stalemated.
Okay, I didn't say it. Okay.
Also in this
What didn't you say?
I don't know if it was in my notes, but I think it was in my notes, but I think I chose not to say it. And I was like, but it felt a bit boring.
The first...
Like the second half. Or maybe like towards the end of the second half. It was just getting like... It was just a bit like... I don't know what to expect. But it's not like because the book feels so unpredictable, but just more like you're like... oh, okay, they'll be happy, they'll get married, and then that's it.
And you're like, what exciting thing could happen?
Yeah.
Also in this, in the third quarter, I'm also learning more about how Embry ties into the more steamy life of Greer and Ash. So that's definitely at least interesting to finally get an idea on that, based on what we saw in the prologue, but also just based on the whole premise of the book. So it's nice to see that finally coming in. For me, it's also interesting to see that dynamic of the three of them develop and how it works, because at least I think for me that's not necessarily a dynamic I understand, and I think that makes me very interested in reading about it and trying to understand. And I think it makes it more interesting for me to try to read about it and understand how the three of them connect together, and also how they function in this dynamic with the three of them.
I think that is the exciting part that covers you to the end. Or like supposed to be the thing that covers you to the end, like how they will manage their relationship as the three of them. Which, compared to husband material, where we had all that discussions, feels like a very basic thing alongside it. But for me, I was like, this is enough. Because I found their dynamic very interesting, but also with the like presidency layer on top of it. But also it's so interesting that you read it without knowing the Arthurian legend element. I don't know if that would make it better or worse.
I guess we'll find out.
I don't think it can make it worse, but I wonder if it would make it better
Or
for
not
you.
change at all.
Or not change at all.
Yeah. I guess we'll see. But also, when I was filming the last half, or reading last quarter, I realized that this is not necessarily the case. Where I'm saying you see the dynamic between the three of them, you kind of do, but the dynamic also comes in later.
Yeah.
But however it was written already at this point, it made it seem like...
Things are sorted.
Yeah.
But were they sorted?
They were not, but... From whatever I read, there was an incident between them, all three of them.
Yes.
And then it like, in that progression, they just like kind of skipped time, and then there was Christmas. And I think in my mind, at the point where I had assumed that had been carrying on. And I think in the last quarter, they talk about like the whole establishing and everything. I was like, oh, that hadn't happened.
I feel that the book does a really good job of translating how Greer feels onto the reader. In some of the parts of the book, there are definitely moments where Greer feels shame or embarrassment, and I feel like that is translated really well, because sometimes reading the book I felt a bit uncomfortable, but not by necessarily the things that were happening, but because it felt uncomfortable like in that situation. And I feel like that is also the whole idea of the situation, that it might be uncomfortable or embarrassing. I feel that the book does a really good job of making the reader feel the emotions that the character is going through. Other than that, I feel like I don't really have many expectations for the book. As I said before, it feels like they break a lot of the normal storyline progressions that I'm used to. So at least for me, this is a bit of an unexpected trajectory. So I am curious. I am expecting that something will go terribly wrong, but we will see if that is going to be truly the case. But definitely enjoying it, and really looking forward to finishing. And since I know that there are at least two other books are related to this one, one from the perspective of Embry and one from Ash, I'm really looking forward to reading those as well.
At the 3/4 mark, I was already planning the next books that I'm going to read. But you see, like, that's what I mean with my updates, because at some point I was like, I'm not sure what things are spoilers or not, so I kind of deviated from most events. I think I went with overall like feelings of me relating to the book.
I have completed the book. Now I must admit, part of it was with the help of an audiobook to get through the last couple of chapters, but that's not because I did not like them, but mostly because I had to finish this on time to be able to film the rest with Olivia. So I resorted to listening to an audiobook for the last 2 hours of the book, and that just made the whole process a bit faster for me, because that meant that I could finish the book within one day, as opposed to reading the 100-ish pages that were left would take me, at least I would not have the 2 hours to just sit and read them. So hence, done with the help of the audiobook, which was also interesting to experience what the audiobook is like for this specific book.
And that's it. So now that I've said that phrase, I like the audiobook. Like, yeah, it's just different experience, but yeah, it was nothing like the other audiobook, so this one was pretty good.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Very second.
Yes.
Would you listen to book 2 or would you read it physically?
I think I would read it just because of all their Steam life. That makes it a little bit easier. I think I prefer to read it. I think when I listen to it, it becomes like overwhelming in a way, just because it's going really fast. But if I read it, then I can read it that bit slightly slower, so that it's like progressing slower.
That is fair.
Now, yeah, I guess at this point there's not much I can say about the storyline of the book itself. You would have to read it for yourself. But overall, I really enjoyed the book. I really like it, and I'm really looking forward to reading the next parts. One thing that I have been thinking about that I feel the book does really well, and I think I've mentioned it before, is how it makes you feel. So I think throughout this book, sometimes I felt very uncomfortable or very kind of unsure of where the story was going and what more there would be to the story actually. And I feel like those might sound like negatives, but I feel that that is what the book is partially about. Sometimes that's what the characters are experiencing. Sometimes that's what Greer is experiencing. That situation is awkward. She's just unsure of how to go on, or she's just going along with the flow. And I feel like that is exactly what I've been doing with this book. So I'm not sure if that is just my experience of how I read the book, or if that is also a little bit intended. So I quite liked it for that aspect. I would say that the book is slightly different in style to what I normally read, but again, that's not a negative. I think I really enjoyed it, and I would like to read more books in this specific style, and since there are 2 following up, I'm quite looking forward to it. One thing that could bug me about this book is the way that it ends, but it does end, at least I feel like it ends in a way that it sets up for the next book. And at least it does make you really want to continue to the next book, but I can imagine if when it gets released you have to wait for it, and then that's not the most fun. So yeah.
You're not a cliffhanger person.
No, I don't like it.
That's fair. I also feel like it didn't need
Yeah,
this cliffhanger that it gives you.
I think that's exactly why I don't like it. Because it didn't need to be there. It's just setting it up for the next book. And if I like the book enough, I'm gonna read the second bit anyway, so why are you making me feel like I have to read the second book?
It's like, I will read the second one if I want to.
Yeah, it's the coming back to the, you know, mind games and the books tricking me that I was saying that I like, but I don't like it when they trick me into like
Getting the next one.
Well, I like being tricked into getting the next one, but I guess not if I have to wait for it. If you release it as one big thing, fine, do whatever. But if you're gonna leave me on the cliffhanger and not give me part 2, don't do that.
But at least I'm really excited to read the next book. But I know that if that's the way the book ended and then I had to wait for some time, I'd feel just a little bit annoyed. But overall, a great read, and I'm very happy that that's the book that I got to read.
What would you rate this out of 5?
The book is gonna get a 4.
4 stars.
Yeah.
Great. We've reached the end of this video. So, let me know in the comment section down below if Yana should start a booktube channel. And also, if you have read a recommendation from your best friend, let me know what book it was and what you thought of it. Did you tell your best friend your true thoughts? I advocate doing it. It worked out well for me. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!